Hey guys, what's going on? James here, and this is it. This is the final Tampa Bay Buccaneers mock draft for the entire draft season. We are less than 24 hours away now from the actual NFL draft, so we can finally put these mock drafts to rest. But for the last one in particular, I have brought in my resident draft expert. It is Logan. Logan, how are you doing today, man?
I'm doing well. It's draft eve, and in this current world right now, it's really all we have to look forward to. So I'm going to soak in this weekend, all 3 days, but especially tomorrow. I'm excited.
Now, I do want to point out Logan will also be on the live stream that I am doing with reacting to the entire first round of the NFL draft. It should be a lot of fun. Logan's going to be there for a pretty decent chunk of the live stream, probably the first couple of picks. So it should be a lot of fun. And Logan, I thank you for being a part of this video, and I thank you for being a part of the live stream tomorrow as well.
Looking forward to it. It should be fun.
All right, so let's go ahead and explain what we're doing here, okay? Now, you guys see on the screen, it says create new draft, and we have all the teams selected. Now, here's what first thing to explain is what we're going to be doing for this mock draft is from pick 1 to pick 13, we are going to be controlling those teams. The reason we are going to be controlling those teams as well as the Tampa Bay Buccaneers is because we want this to be one of the more realistic mock drafts we can possibly give. Okay, so we are going to be controlling teams 1 through 13, then the Bucs pick, and then we are going to be closing out of that mock draft, starting a new mock draft where we are just using the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and then we will make our 2nd through 7th round draft picks, okay? That's the first thing to get out of the way. The second thing that we are going to be getting out of the way here is there aren't going to be any trades in this mock draft, okay? You won't, physically see any trades being made. However, our slight fix to that situation, at least up until pick 14, is we are going to be picking players based on what number we think they're going to be picked at, not whether or not we think that the team that originally has the pick is going to pick that player. So just to kind of explain it, let's say, the Miami Dolphins have the pick number 5, okay? But they decide to trade down. A team trades up to pick number 5, and they select an offensive tackle. Just an example. So in this mock draft, we will have the Miami Dolphins taking the player that whatever team trades up to get. So while you may see the Miami Dolphins pick an offensive tackle, that doesn't mean we think that the Miami Dolphins are going to take an offensive tackle with pick number 5. We think a trade up is going to happen. We think that whoever that player may be will be taken with that number 5 selection for whoever trades up to select that player. Did I explain that well, Logan? Does that make sense?
I think as we go, we'll see. We'll talk it out. We'll explain all of our rationale and all that. So hopefully it'll make sense by then. And if not, it's just people just yell at you in the comments. What's the big deal?
That's true. So we'll figure this. We'll explain it as we go. Let's get started with the mock draft. First pick, Logan, Joe Burrow. Is it Joe Burrow?
The slam dunk. It's Joe Burrow, and got a lot of Cincinnati fans that I know that are very excited about this pick and see what he might be able to bring to the team. He's coming off the best season in college football history, no hyperbole. So he's ready to rock it. He's coming in with a lot of mojo, a lot of swagger, but hopefully not the Baker Mayfield type. And hopefully he's going to deliver. So
yeah, so that's a slam dunk pick. Joe Burrow,
yeah.
Number 1. Number 2,
Absolutely.
Washington Redskins, Chase Young.
Chase Young, yeah. I think in their case, it's maybe not as much of like a positional need, but I think he's even with respect to Joe Burrow, Chase Young is considered the top player in the class regardless of position. So I think it's another slam dunk pick there.
Right. And by the way, Joe Burrow, hey, 2 Ohio State players getting taken number 1 and number 2 overall. We don't forget.
That's right.
We
That's right. Joe Burrow might have won his national championship at LSU, but he has a degree from the Ohio State University. Nobody can ever take that away. So he's a Buckeye for life.
I didn't know he had a degree from Ohio State University, actually.
Yeah. That's why he was able to transfer immediately since he was a grad transfer. So, yeah, me and Joe Burrow graduated from the same school.
So there you have it. So Chase Young.
I don't think Chase graduated, but that's okay.
That's fine. Chase Young, Joe Burrow. You imagine Chase Young would graduate eventually. He will. So yeah, a couple of Ohio State players.
$100 million.
Yeah, see, there you go. So a couple of Ohio State players going number 1 and going number 2. Now number 3 is where it gets interesting. The Detroit Lions. Now, what do you think is going to happen here? First thing I got to ask you, do you think there's going to be some type of trade up?
I think this is the first position where real serious trade talks will be happening. I think obviously the first two picks, they're going to listen to stuff, but I don't think anything will ever get close. Pick three, I think, is where it'll start as teams. If somebody's really wanting a specific quarterback, they could start to try to trade up. I mean, they have multiple needs right now. I think they're more so in rebuild mode, so they're more likely to field some offers. I think for the purposes of this mock draft, though, given the trade that they made, getting rid of Darius Slay, I think bringing in Jeffrey Okudah, cornerback, to replace him, he's a plug and play day one starter. I still think that's the most likely thing, but I do think this is where tomorrow night we could start to see the first shakeups happening with a potential trade, but I'll still stand with that pick.
Yeah, I'll stand with it as well. I feel like Okudah's a really safe pick. Okay, that's the thing. And I feel like the Lions, they did sign Marcus Trufant, which I completely forgot about in the offseason, but, you can do a little bit better,
Yeah.
Is it Desmond Trufant or Marcus Trufant? I think it's Desmond Trufant. Anyway, the point is they tried to replace Darius Slay, but it's Darius Slay. He's kind of a hard guy to replace, and they need more young corners. Okay, and I think that getting a guy like Jeffrey Okudah, pretty safe pick. 3 Ohio State guys in the first 3 picks. Hey, what are you gonna do? It's just that kind of life.
Not too bad. Not too bad. Where Ohio State's recruiting right now for current high school players, it is shot up, and I definitely think the NFL success they're having with their players is a big part of that. So this just continues to help the brand. So I'm happy to see it.
There you have it. So pick number 4. Now this again, I'm gonna ask you, do you think a trade up happens?
So I think at this point, if you ask me in the first 4 picks, do you think a trade is going to happen? I think it's fairly likely that a trade by now would happen. Which one will it be? I'm not sure. So I think this is still kind of where we're talking about, regardless of who is the team picking, who is the most likely person to be picked. And I still do think this is a good opportunity for one of the tackles to come off the board. And so I think for most teams, there's some debate between Wirfs or Wills, maybe, who's the top one. But my guess, I think would be Jedrick Wills to be the first tackle off the board. Obviously, I think a lot of teams will give Isaiah Simmons a long look here, and that's a position of need for the Giants. But I think that would probably be my most likely guess for pick number 4. What do you think?
So you're saying Jedrick Wills?
Yeah,
whether it's the Giants or somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
Well, because it's you think what?
Yeah, I think obviously there might be some teams looking at quarterback to try to trade up there with the Dolphins and Chargers both obviously right now signaling that they might be taking a quarterback. So it is possible another team further down might try to trade up into that spot to grab one of those 2 quarterbacks, but I think they'd have to give the Giants a lot. So I think the safest guess or prediction right now would be to go with either Wills or potentially Isaiah Simmons. But I think I'm leaning more towards Jedrick Wills for this.
I think I'll agree with you here. I almost wanted to put Isaiah Simmons here. Okay, I did.
Yeah, it is a tough debate. I've just been, I don't know, I'm sure you're on Twitter constantly like I am, especially right now when we're at home constantly. But even though everybody loves Isaiah Simmons, I've seen more and more people starting to see him mocked a little bit later, not in the top 5 picks. Not anything to do with his talent whatsoever, just more so due to positional need. Obviously, tackles and quarterbacks are the highest value positions, and so that kind of contributing to the potential fall for him, but just a few picks. Nothing to do with his talent whatsoever. So
I agree with that. I agree with that. So whether it be, the Giants or another team, this is the first scenario where we're talking about where, hey, if it's the Giants, if it's a team that trades up with the Giants, we think that Jedrick Wills is going to be the number 4 overall pick in this draft. Okay, regardless of who's picking, that's going to be the guy at pick number 4. Now, pick 5 is another part where it gets interesting because, again, the rumors are out there, okay? We know the Miami Dolphins, they're either going to take Tua, they're going to take Justin Herbert, but the trade-up rumors are still there. Do you see the Miami Dolphins trading down?
It's hard to see because, I mean, as well as I do the past year, fans online have been saying #tank for Tua.
Yeah.
I mean, for a lot of the year, they were kind of in the pole position to be that number 1 overall pick. Then Tua's had his injuries, And so it's kind of a lot of people are now thinking Herbert while they trade down. Um, I personally think it's a lot of smoke. We live here in Florida, or I mean, right now I'm here quarantining in Florida, but a lot of the Miami insiders, I still believe that Tua will be the pick despite all of those concerns. Recent reports have come out showing that he had 5 surgeries during his time at Alabama, so some questions about his durability. But I think if he was healthy, he would be right up there battling Joe Burrow for that number 1 overall spot. I think that's just a little bit too much to pass up for the Dolphins. I still think that's the most likely pick, but obviously I do think a quarterback is the most likely pick to go here. And between him and Herbert, it's kind of anybody's guess. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, that's the big thing too. People last year were saying Tua's going to go number 1. That's just it,
Mm-hmm.
And then Joe Burrow came and just completely lit the world on fire, and then Tua got hurt. So it took a lot of factors to make Tua not be the number 1 overall guy in this draft. A lot of bad stuff had to happen. I feel like the Miami Dolphins, exactly what you said. It's smoke. They've been coveting him since last year. When reports are coming out a year in advance that you are going to do everything you can to take this guy,
Mm-hmm.
how do you refute that, in my opinion? So, all the smoke, all the mirrors, whatever you want to call it, is there a trade up? I don't think I could even see the Dolphins trading up because they don't want to lose out on Tua, So I think Tua should be the pick here. It's, a lot of smoke screens surrounding the Miami Dolphins, lots. But I think they're just going to say, you know what, screw it. We're taking Tua here, and we'll figure out the rest of the stuff with our other 2 first-round draft picks. So, yeah, I think Tua is going to be the pick. Pick number 6. This is another one where it gets interesting. The Los Angeles Chargers. Now, Justin Herbert is on the board. Isaiah Simmons is on the board, although you probably don't have him, going to the Los Angeles Chargers. It's pretty much Justin Herbert, probably, right?
I think that's probably the most likely thing to happen there at that pick. I think they've been looking for a quarterback as well, and I think as we've been talking about, not necessarily by who's actually picking, but by the positions. I think top 6 picks, the ones that we've so far been selecting, I think are the most likely people to be selected there. So I do think Herbert will be the pick. That's just kind of what I'm thinking. Regardless if somebody tries to trade up, I don't see one of those 2 quarterbacks dropping further. I guess it is possible, but that's kind of what I think.
Right. I agree with that. I mean, that's whichever quarterback Miami doesn't take, they're going to the Chargers, and again, it just seems like every pick has trade up rumors. No, all the quarterback picks I feel pretty safe about, I really do. So Herbert, he's going to the Los Angeles Chargers in this one. Now we get to the Carolina Panthers. This one's interesting because they need a lot of help at a lot of different situations. You could make an argument for both Derek Brown, Tristan Wirfs, or Andrew Thomas, or Isaiah Simmons. You could make an argument for all 4 of those guys going to this pick. Also, a trade down could also happen depending on what the Carolina Panthers want to do. What are your thoughts on pick number 7 right now?
Yeah, this is the most, I think, easily the most interesting pick so far as if you're looking at who's available. All of those teams need these they need every one of these positions for those who are still available. So I think it'll be really interesting to see what the Panthers do here. It's just really hard. I think for me the battle would be mostly between Derek Brown. He is a monster of an interior defensive lineman. He's not much of a run stuffer. Like he can rush the passer. He can be a pass rusher as well. So a little bit more value than just a pure run stuffer. But still sitting there is Isaiah Simmons, and I think he just might be too good of a prospect for them to pass up. So I think that's my pick, my prediction for who will go there. But I think there'll be lots of talks inside. Well, I guess they're not really going to be inside their stadiums talking about it. It'll be interesting to see how all this logistics stuff work. But however they are doing that, I think Isaiah Simmons is the most likely pick here. Are you leaning more towards Derek Brown? What do you think?
Well, let me ask you this. Do you think a team trades up for an offensive tackle here? That's
That's a
tough.
good question. It is tough. Um, I still think there are several more teams that are just behind that do need offensive tackles, so it could entice a few of those teams to try to trade up and get. I think Tristan Wirfs is the clear number two tackle,
Mhm.
even though Thomas and Becton are there. I think he's clearly the number two, and so a team who might prefer him over the other two by considerable margin might try to move up into that spot. Um, but I mean, Isaiah Simmons, you could argue is a top three talent, so the Panthers might not be persuaded to trade down, and they might want to grab that player if he's still available.
Okay. Okay, I'll agree with that because I'm looking at the board right now as well. I see at least three teams who would want to take a tackle anyway. Um, so I'll say, yeah, Isaiah Simmons, pick 7. Sucks for, the NFC South because he's a beast, but, pick 7, he's fallen far enough. I mean, you could have made a legitimate argument for him at pick number 3 too. And
Yeah,
him going
absolutely.
him going down to pick 7, that's all good. All right, now pick number 8 here. The Arizona Cardinals. Now, I think this is where an offensive tackle comes off the board.
Yeah, I don't think there's any argument about that. That's definitely a position of need for them, looking to protect that now potent offense that they're building there, trying to develop that more. So I think Tristan Wirfs seems like a pretty obvious pick for them if he's still going to be available at this play. So
Right, especially considering it's like you're not going to take a wide receiver. You just got DeAndre Hopkins. You got to protect Kyler Murray. You know,
mhm.
I agree with you here. I think this is a pretty easy pick now, especially given how the board's fallen. I think Tristan Wirfs out of Iowa, that's probably going to be the pick. Now we get to the Jacksonville Jaguars, and I don't think another offensive tackle comes off here. Do you think this is where I think it's between Derek Brown and C.J. Henderson?
Yeah, I think that will be the internal debate if both are available at this place. I think those are both positions of need for them. Um, and I guess you kind of look at, all right, what are the second and third, fourth best, options at the position if we can't get this guy? And I think for most people who are following the draft, CJ Henderson is pretty clearly in that top tier with just below Jeff Okuda, but then after that, there's a pretty steep drop off between the next several. Um, with tackles, it's not as deep of a tackle class, so there's a pretty big debate there. So I'm pretty torn. I think I might personally lean more towards Derek Brown being the pick, but I know a lot of people seem to be thinking it would be C.J. Henderson. So I'll kind
It's
of defer to you on this one and what you're thinking.
it's tough because whichever one doesn't get picked, I don't see a realistic spot as to where they could go, you know?
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
let's just assume, the next couple of tackles get off the board. It's tough. It's tough, man. Uh, I'm gonna say Derek Brown. I'm gonna say Derek Brown because I don't even know what the Jaguars are doing at this point. In terms of their rebuild, they seemingly are
they
getting rid
just
of.
they need every position. So
Right, I mean,
I mean, they might trade down. You
right.
never know.
So, but that leads me to this point: is Derek Brown, being here? I think either the Jaguars take him, or even if there is a trade down, I think somebody would trade up for Derek Brown.
Yeah, I think you could definitely argue he's the best available at this time, regardless of position. So that
Right,
I'm
right.
good with that.
So regardless of what happens with pick number 9, be it the Jaguars or a trade up, Derek Brown we think is going to go at pick number 9. Pick number 10, Cleveland Browns. This is getting tough because there's only 2 offensive tackles left on the board, and the Browns and the Jets need an offensive tackle.
hmm
So what do
And
you?
to be clear, when we say that, we mean right now, as far as most people see, there's 4 clear elite offensive tackles compared to the rest. There are more that are draftable, but
Right.
yeah,
So right now as it stands, if you're the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, do you think about trading up to pick 10 to get an Andrew Thomas or a Mekhi Becton? Because I don't think either one of them is going to be at pick 14.
yeah. I mean, that is quite the concern. But the other thing you have to think about right now, there are also several elite wide receivers that have not yet come off the board. So while the Browns, Jets, and Buccaneers might all be sweating, thinking about offensive tackles, there's a lot of teams also thinking about the wide receivers that, and many other draft classes might be considered a top 5 overall talent, but just based on positions of need and everything, they've kind of fallen down. So there also could start to be a run of wide receivers around this position. So,
Right.
everybody's kind of gaming the system, and I think for the Bucs, they're most likely, especially since they just traded a pick away yesterday. Obviously, your channel's been all over that story. We don't need to go into that. They might not be but they are also in win now mode, so I could see them doing it. But I think at this point they might
Just let the
kind of
board
wait
fall.
to see. Yeah, I think that's probably the most likely thing. So, and I think between Andrew Thomas or Mekhi Becton, I think more of the Browns insiders have seen thinking that they might be leaning more towards Mekhi Becton. He's a pretty elite run blocker. And obviously the Browns are going to try to be pounding the football with Nick Chubb. So I think that's the more likely out of those two. So that's what I would see here, this pick.
Okay. I'll go with you on that one. It is tough. It is tough though to not sit, to not think, geez, they might not get it. They might not get either one at this point. But we'll go ahead and say Mekhi Becton for the purposes of this mock draft. Cleveland does need an offensive tackle. They do. That's a fact. And we'll have them taking Mekhi Becton here. Didn't they sign Jack Conklin in free agency, or was that somebody else? They might have signed Jack Conklin in free agency.
I'm not too sure.
But I do believe they still need an offensive tackle, so we'll have them taking Mekhi Becton. And now we're on to the New York Jets, pick 11. They need an offensive tackle. That is arguably one of their top needs. What do you think happens here?
Yeah, this is an interesting one because, as we've said, there is at this point one offensive tackle who's clearly seen above in that more upper echelon. But they also did lose Robbie Anderson in the offseason, and I think they brought in one receiver. I'm not sure if he's
Brashad
necessarily
Perriman.
on. They brought in Brashad Perriman.
They brought in Brashad Perriman.
But I still think wide receiver is a position of need for them, and there are all of those wide receivers still sitting there. I think the Jets might look even to trade down out of this pick. They do have several positions of need, and there's a lot of good wide receiver talent in this draft. But if they really are looking for the offensive tackle, if Andrew Thomas is still sitting there, that's a pretty tough thing to pass up on. So.
Yeah,
I'm pretty undecided on this one. What are you thinking?
Well, here's one thing we can't ignore. C.J. Henderson's still on the board right now.
Yeah.
And I think that a team. There's been a lot of rumors of the Jets trading back, a lot. And I could legitimately see a team like the Denver Broncos, or maybe even the Dallas Cowboys, possibly wanting to jump ahead of the Raiders and 49ers and have their pick of the top 3 wide receivers.
Yeah,
that's what I think.
I definitely could see that here as well. Grabbing one of those wide receivers. The Raiders are sitting there at 12. All signs indicate they're going to grab a receiver. So
same thing can be said for the 49ers,
Yeah. So if there's a team who really likes one of those top guys, I absolutely could see that. And I think, as we've mentioned a few times, there's very, very possible that there could be a pretty crazy run of wide receivers once that dam bursts open. So this could be the start of that right here.
Right. I agree. So. For this, we're gonna say wide receiver, okay? And I know this is where the controversy is gonna start coming in, okay? This is where it's gonna start coming in. But which wide receiver would you have going here at pick 11 out of CeeDee Lamb, Henry Ruggs, and Jerry Jeudy?
Yeah, I've gotten to watch all 3 of them play several games during college, and I think out of the 3 of them, the most explosive and the most that I see as the most, potential all-pro talent out of them. I think all 3 of them could reach that status, but for me, I think Jerry Jeudy is that top of line one. He's just a slightly higher echelon above the other 2. So I think for me, that would be my pick if I could pick any of the wide receivers, and I think he's the most likely one to come off the board first.
Okay, I agree with that. I do agree with that. I think that would be, either the Jets or whichever team decides to trade up, be it the Broncos, the Cowboys, whoever wants to trade up, because there's teams further back in the first round that could trade up as well. I think the pick 11, I agree with that, Jerry Jeudy. Now we roll on to the Las Vegas Raiders. No longer Oakland, they're in Las Vegas. To me, now it's a decision of, do you take one of the wide receivers or do you take CJ Henderson? They need both really bad. Really bad. So what do you think happens here?
Yeah, I think John Gruden's there leading the way. You can never really predict what he's going to be doing there. So
No, you
I
cannot.
think I think it's not an easy pick. I really do see though, either here at pick 12 or 13, if CJ Henderson's on the board, one of these teams or another team is going to trade up to get CJ Henderson. So I think maybe some of that internal calculus for the teams here could be whether, if they did have Jerry Jeudy at number one on their wide receiver board, now he's gone to another team. Might they trade up, or might they wait to grab a receiver, since it is a very deep wide receiver class, and go ahead and get CJ Henderson, one of the other premier cornerbacks? So I think that very well could be the pick here at pick 12.
And I think that would be a pretty premium pick. You know what I mean? Like that's
Yeah,
a pretty good
it's really
deal.
good value. Yeah.
Yeah, that's some really good value. And the big thing too is, while CeeDee Lamb, Henry Ruggs, Jerry Jeudy, they're all phenomenal. This wide receiver class is deep. The Raiders still have pick 19.
Mm-hmm.
They still have pick 19. They can still do something.
Absolutely.
I think if CJ Henderson fell here, which is a realistic possibility, I don't think John Gruden passes up on that.
I agree.
I don't think so. So we're gonna have CJ Henderson go here, which leads us to the final pick before the Tampa Bay Buccaneers pick, the San Francisco 49ers. Their top need is cornerback, followed by wide receiver. If CJ Henderson was there, he probably would have been that pick. But now it's basically just a debate as to whether or not it's CeeDee Lamb or Henry Ruggs.
Yeah. I mean, again, I don't think potential, if Andrew Thomas is still on the board here at this time, I would imagine the 49ers are going to field several calls, because obviously, like we said, if they want to go and get a wide receiver later, they could trade down to later in the middle of the first round and potentially get one of those, or trade down with a few of those teams. Who's at 16, 17? I mean,
Falcons need a tackle. Broncos need a tackle.
Yeah. So I do think that is entirely possible. I think for the purposes of this mock draft, I do think it is probably more likely though that one of those wide receivers will be taken. And I think it's I think especially if it's a team like the 49ers and how they run their offense, I think Henry Ruggs might be more of the receiver they're looking for. Obviously, CeeDee Lamb is a fantastic receiver in his own right, but just based on the style of play, I think Henry Ruggs might be a good fit for the 49ers.
I'll agree with that. Him fitting into Kyle Shanahan's offense with, Jimmy Garoppolo, and they have a weird group of wide receivers, if I'm being honest with you. Deebo Samuel, Dante Pettis, Marquise Goodwin, who's apparently on the trade block now. It's weird. Yeah. It's a weird mesh of guys, but they really like some speedy wide receivers, so it'll be interesting. Absolutely. It'll be interesting, but Henry Ruggs is who we have going as the pick to the San Francisco 49ers. Now we're here at the Bucs pick, and we have to explain this. Why did we have Andrew Thomas fall to pick 14?
Yeah, I mean, there's just clearly so many different elite. There's obviously in any draft, there's going to be a tier of elite players, and then after that, there's significant fall off, and there at several different positions. That's what happened here in this draft, and I do think based on that and some of the gamesmanship and teams trading up and whatnot, I do think it's entirely possible that one of those four tackles fall here. And out of those four, I think Andrew Thomas is the most likely. Mekhi Becton could also be the last of those four. So I think if either one of those two is available, the Bucs will snag them. But I do think also for the purpose of this mock draft, we should also look at who else is available and maybe have a discussion about who the Bucs might be taking if all four of those tackles are off the board.
Right. So, Andrew Thomas is obviously here. If they don't trade up, I know a lot of people are thinking the Bucs are going to trade up at this point. That's not a guarantee, especially in the first round. We've never seen the Tampa Bay Buccaneers trade up. Actually, the Buccaneers have traded back multiple times in the first round since Jason Light has been the general manager. But here, in my opinion, I think it's down to Javon Kinlaw, probably Andrew Thomas. You're not going to take a CeeDee Lamb. Clayvon Chasen is interesting out of LSU, but the need isn't necessarily there considering you have JPP and Shaq Barrett as your starting tackles. you need a starting impact guy. So I think it comes down to Andrew Thomas and Javon Kinlaw. If right now, I guess I should say, but if none of the offensive tackles are there and Javon Kinlaw is still on the board, I would assume he's the pick. But if none of those
Do you
five,
think
say again.
do you think it's also possible then if those tackles aren't there that they might trade back and
Yep, that was
if they feel like Kinlaw might be obviously a good player, but is the value there at pick 14? That might be a question. And given that history of trading back, there are several other teams eyeing that. Oh man, we really like a few of these wide receivers that are still there. They might get some decent offers and trade back potentially completely out of the first round, or falling back towards the second half of it. It's very possible.
Yeah, I don't think that the Bucs would trade back completely out of the first round. But I do think if all four of the offensive tackles aren't there and they're really not sold on Javon Kinlaw, you got to consider trading back. I'm looking at the board. The Vikings have pick 22 and pick 25. That's a pretty decent trade back target,
Yeah.
Getting both those first round picks for pick 14, make two picks, maybe one of them's a running back, maybe one of them is a later offensive tackle like a Josh Jones out of Houston. It's not a terrible deal,
Yeah, that could be very interesting.
Yeah, that could be very, very interesting. So just to, say this here, if none of the offensive tackles are on the board, which is entirely possible, I think it's either Javon Kinlaw or they trade back. Okay.
No Jordan Love talk. We're not feeling the love.
We're not feeling the love for Jordan Love. I just don't think they'll do it. I think they would maybe take a quarterback rounds 4 through 5. They already have 3 on their roster. They have obviously Tom Brady, Blaine Gabbert, and Ryan Griffin. So their quarterback room hasn't changed besides swapping out Jameis for Brady. But I really don't know if they would do that. I think they want to get players who can start right now, especially in the first round. And getting a starting offensive tackle in round 1, that would probably be on the top of their list. Or if you can, maybe getting a starting defensive end, in Javon Kinlaw, be him and Ndamukong Suh and Vita Vea. It's a pretty good group of guys,
Yeah, not bad at all.
Right. So I think whoever they take, they won't take a developmental guy round 1. That would kind of be a waste of a first round pick. And I know people are going to point to Patrick Mahomes. That's a incredibly rare scenario that we don't have enough time to delve into right now.
Yeah.
But
And I think especially with adding Brady and Gronk, I mean, the Bucs have to be thinking win now mode and plugging in people who can start day 1 or at least contribute day 1.
Right. So we're going to go with Andrew Thomas here. So real quick, what can we say about Andrew Thomas?
I mean, he battled for 3 years in the SEC. He's not, more of that prototypical size for left tackle, like 6'7", 6'8", but he is a solid 6'5", really good frame. He's pretty well rounded. I think a few of the other ones in that top tier considered elite at whether run blocking, pass blocking. He's pretty balanced, I would say. But yeah, I do see if he is available there, he could come in and start day 1 potentially. So I think that's what the Bucs would be looking for out of him if they drafted him.
So 2 things. So can he play right tackle? Because the Bucs right now as it stands, they don't necessarily need a left tackle, they need a right tackle. That's the big thing. And number 2, would you say it is realistic for him to potentially fall to pick 14 out of all 4 of the big 4 offensive tackles? We're saying that he's the most likely to fall.
Yeah, most likely, I think it depends on who you ask, him or Mekhi. Depending on who the team is drafting, might have one of those 2 valued above the other. But I definitely think that Wills and Wirfs will 100% be off the board by pick 14. But I think the possibility of either Thomas or Becton being here at 14 is maybe about 55, 60%. But just depending on how things go, if there's not a lot of trades and people are just picking based on need, then it is entirely possible that all 4 will be gone and they might be looking at their other options. So,
right. And I do want to say, we didn't include a trade up in this mock draft, not because we don't feel it's unrealistic. It could realistically happen. But I don't feel like it's the most realistic option. It doesn't make sense for Jason Light's character to trade up in the first round. They still can get somebody at pick 14, or they'll just trade back. They've done it before. They could easily do it again. In terms of trading back, Jason Light is preferred almost seemingly to trade back in the first round and kind of sit it out, get more draft picks. Right now as it stands, the Bucs don't have a lot of cap space. They still have to field a roster. They
Yeah,
can't afford to be blowing a ton of draft picks that you can just use to get bodies in the door. Just to field a team, because they don't have the cap space
absolutely.
to do it. So we don't have them trading up in this. We'll have them taking Andrew Thomas here at pick 14. They're going to keep their picks. They still have to bulk up a lot of their depth. They are in win now mode, but you can still be in win now mode and, not have to make some crazy trade up move. They've done a lot already to help out their chances, okay? It's not like they have to just destroy everything, okay? They've been doing a lot already. So I feel like they're going to stay on put at pick 14. Potentially take Andrew Thomas if he's there. That's who will have him going to, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers right here at pick 14. And they're going to keep their picks and build up more depth in other places. All right, so now we're here in the second round. You see all these names. Logan, I was just telling you off camera here for a second. This is where you get some problems. Jonathan Taylor's still on the board at pick 45. He won't be, probably, unless something weird happens. I'm trying to be realistic. And while I don't 100% agree with it, because, I love Ronald Jones. I do. And I'm sure people just got giddy because they know what this means. Clyde Edwards-Helaire out of LSU. I love the guy. I think he's a very good running back. I think he should more be a compliment to Ronald Jones rather than usurp him as the starting running back. But Logan, what are your thoughts on Clyde Edwards-Helaire?
Yeah, and I don't think, the state of this mock draft, I don't think it's entirely out of the realm of possibility that Jonathan Taylor is still here at pick 45. It just kind of depends on the teams. Obviously, DeAndre Swift, J.K. Dobbins, I think have already been taken at this point. So those are two backs. If they were available, then the Bucs might give a long look at. But Jonathan Taylor is more of that prototypical between the tackles running back. I mean, he did have some success out of the backfield, but I don't necessarily see him as the best fit for what the Bucs are trying to do, especially if what I've seen out of Tom Brady and the offense that he's been flourishing under the past several years. A lot of, I call them more scat backs who are out of the backfield and are getting a lot of those dump down passes and can move with it. And I think that perfectly fits Clyde Edwards-Helaire's skill set. But him back there with Rojo, I think, if they're going to bring him in, it's not going to be an every down back, but I think he could really boost what they're doing, and he brings a lot of good skill to the table. I think it'd be a really interesting pick.
I think the biggest thing that the Bucs need at the running back position, because Bruce Arians even came out and said it, and you know what? I'll admit it too. Ronald Jones ain't a receiving back yet. He's not. I think he can do a lot of great stuff, and I think he can be a great receiving back if he works his way up, but not yet. So, in terms of talking about Clyde Edwards-Helaire's receiving ability, what can we say about that?
Yeah, I mean, it helps a lot when you have Joe Burrow as your quarterback, and he was dancing around a lot and keeping plays alive, which allowed Helaire to get some more catches, but he showed some really good hands, especially towards the end of the season. And I think he does excel outside of the tackles, really good juking, cutting ability that is well suited to receiving back. So I think he definitely would be an upgrade from Rojo. And Taylor, he also did some of that out in school, but I would think Helaire, if that's what they're looking for, would be who they would be more likely to lean towards.
Okay, so while it kills me for my boy Ronald Jones, I'm trying to be realistic here, and I'm going to say Clyde Edwards-Helaire. That's what I'm going to say.
Yeah, but I mean, Helaire, he's no taller than 5'8". He's not going to come in and be a 3-down back. So I think drafting a running back in no way means that's the end of Rojo, and he could still flourish and have a great season. But, he's not going to be the feature back, which I think is probably best for all involved, honestly.
Ho-hum. Okay. CEH is coming to TB. I don't know what I'm doing at this point. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is the pick. So round number 3, Logan. My boy is here, Antonio Gibson out of Memphis. We can't take him. We already took Clyde Edwards-Helaire, but I do want to say Antonio Gibson is going to be a star in the NFL. You heard it here first. I cannot stress that enough. Now, this is where things get interesting. You got a lot of wide receivers on the board. You still got Donovan Peoples-Jones out of Michigan. Chase Claypool out of Notre Dame. And then you have some interesting stuff. You got 2 quarterbacks, Jalen Hurts out of Oklahoma, Jacob Eason out of Washington. First thing I want to address, quarterback here, yay or nay?
Well, hey, you and I have talked. We've talked a lot about Jacob Eason, and if he's the quarterback that's available, I say run away. I mean, I am on record as saying that he's not a good fit for the NFL. He's below average passer. That's my personal opinion. He had a lot of hype coming out of high school and showed it early in his college career, but he really struggled, especially this past season. Jalen Hurts is definitely interesting, and if the Bucs are at a position where they don't, if they're feeling they're not going to get somebody who's an immediate starter, then they might start to be looking towards the future. I mean, Brady's not going to be here forever, so it depends on what you guys think of Hurts, but for the Bucs' sake, I hope Eason isn't the pick.
Yeah, I've heard he's had attitude problems is a big thing. I've heard he's a little crazy. That's just me. I'm not gonna say the validity. I'm not here to say the validity of those reports. I've just heard some people say that he has a little bit of an attitude problem. Just what I've heard. So then what are we thinking here position wise at pick 76?
And you're saying is wide receiver another position that they're looking to complement with?
Well, let's talk about that then, because they just lost Brashad Perriman in free agency. And after Mike Evans and after Chris Godwin, oh, buddy, it's shaky, to say the least. Scotty Miller's there, who I like Scotty Miller. I think that he can do some really good stuff, but he's been unreliable with injury concerns. That's the one thing I have against Scotty Miller right now is can he stay healthy? Justin Watson, not so much injury prone, but just it seems like he's in the doghouse a little bit. Okay, that's just me. I don't know how well he's going to do in terms of integrating with, Tom Brady and Bruce Arians in year 2 in Bruce Arians' offensive system, because it really looked like he struggled in year 1. Just my thoughts on that. After those 2 guys, you have some major question marks in terms of your wide receiver depth. And when I say major, I mean it's freaking huge, okay? You lost Brashad Perriman in free agency. The Buccaneers wanted to bring him back. The man got $8 million a year. What can you say about that? But I think you could realistically think about taking a wide receiver in the 3rd round, okay? And I know people are going to cry foul and say, but O.J. Howard and Rob Gronkowski and Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and weapons. I get that. I do. And people aren't going to want to hear this, but Chris Godwin's contract runs out soon. It's not super guaranteed the Bucs are even going to be able to financially keep him due to how much money he's going to command. He can make more money than Mike Evans. That's a fact. So you've got to prepare for something like that. We love Chris Godwin. We would love to bring back Chris Godwin. Of course we would. I would love to have Chris Godwin back, but it's not a guarantee. So you have to prepare yourself a little bit. And life after Chris Godwin, if it's Mike Evans, Scotty Miller, Justin Watson, and some other question marks, that's not great, And we also saw injuries to Mike Evans and Chris Godwin last season, and look what happened. After Brashad Perriman, things just didn't go great. So I think wide receiver, we are going to go ahead and look at some of the wide receivers here, Logan. Donovan Peoples-Jones, Chase Claypool, Bryan Edwards, and Van Jefferson are the top 4 wide receivers on the board right now. What do you think of those 4 guys?
Well, I will tell you that Donovan Peoples-Jones, if he is still available at this pick, then if I'm the Bucs, I'm clicking on that. With their virtual draft they're doing, I'd click on his name as soon as possible. He is absolutely a first-round talent. He went and played at Michigan, and historically I'm very low on Michigan prospects, just given my fandom of Ohio State. But he was a player out of high school. He was the number 1 wide receiver in the country. He is incredibly athletically gifted. I think his combine numbers were pretty much off the chart, so he hasn't lost a step. The biggest knock on him is his production in college wasn't there. I think really that's more of a reflection on Michigan's offense overall and their lackluster quarterback play. I definitely think he just needs a good opportunity, and he's going to shine in the NFL. So if Donovan Peoples-Jones is still there, I would say go for it. Although he is a little bit more of a possession receiver. He's not playing, I would say, in the slot. So maybe for the Bucs, they might be looking for somebody who more fills that role. But as far as looking at outside receivers, I would go DPJ all the way.
I gotcha. Now, let me ask you this. At pick 76, is it realistic for him to be there? That's the big thing here.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't see him going in the first round. I said he's a first round talent, but like I said, his production wasn't there in college. So I do think it is very possible he goes to the third round. I think at that point, there's going to be a lot of teams looking at him, and there could even be teams who might trade to get him, because I think at this place he is a decent value pick. Chase Claypool is another receiver. He's kind of one of those. I don't know if they're going to bring in Gronk, he might not necessarily be a person they look at, because he's kind of like a hybrid wide receiver tight end, 6'3", 6'4", pretty bulky guy. So I don't necessarily see him being the pick. So yeah, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that Donovan Peoples-Jones would still be here.
Okay, so for that, then we'll go ahead and we'll take Donovan Peoples-Jones with the Buccaneers' third round pick 76. We'll go ahead and go for that. All right, we are here in the fourth round, and we have a couple of options, okay? We just talked about this off screen, and we're thinking going to the defensive side of the ball, since we've obviously blown three draft picks on the offensive side of the ball. Maybe it's time to go defensive a little bit. We were a little bit torn between edge rusher and safety. We are going to go edge rusher, but we do want to point out some of the safeties that are here. Alohi Gilman out of Notre Dame, Kenny Robinson out of West Virginia, Brandon Jones out of Texas, and Julian Blackman out of Utah. Those are kind of the top guys available right now. We could still take one of them later on. We'll have to wait and see. But, you could consider safety in round 4. And I know some people might say, oh, but we have spent so many draft picks in the secondary. And I get that. Trust me, I get that. But you can never... it's a fourth rounder. Justin Evans is still a little bit of a question mark. They still have room, I think, for one more safety to kind of, consider adding one. So I wouldn't count it out, but we did want to mention that here.
Well, real quick, James, in our mock draft, are you able to see when Antoine Winfield Jr. went, what pick he went at?
He was a first-round pick.
He was, okay. That is one thing that if he happened to fall somehow to the second round when the Bucs are picking, that would be a dream pick. I think he's going to have a long NFL career.
Well, I think the big thing with him, too, is you can play him at cornerback or safety.
Yeah.
I think just like his dad, just flat out. So I think he'd be really good.
Yeah.
But, let's go ahead and let's go back to the edge rushers that are available right now. You have Alex Highsmith out of Charlotte, Kenny Wilecki out of Michigan State, and Alton Robinson out of Syracuse is your top 3. We've already talked about this. We're going to go with Kenny Wilecki out of Michigan State. What can we say about Kenny Wilecki?
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy, he's multi-year starter at Michigan State. He's a pretty, I guess you could call him like a stick his hand in the ground and go type of guy, high motor. He's pretty disruptive. I think he's going to be really great in run support as well. And I think he's going to provide really good depth. I don't necessarily see him, rising to a Pro Bowl level, but I think he is going to provide really good support and as a decent value pick in the middle of the fourth round. Whereas a few of these other guys, I think it'd be a little bit more, they might have slightly higher ceilings, but they're definitely not as polished, and you're not as sure with their track record. Whereas Wilecki, he's going to be a really great run support help, as well as being able to be effective in rushing the passer.
Is it Wilecki? Is it Wilecki? I'm saying Wilecki's. It's Wilecki.
I think it's. I don't know. You pronouncing it's throwing me off a little bit.
Kenny Wilecki. It's Kenny Wilecki. Probably.
Right, we'll go with it.
So anyway, Kenny Wilecki out of Michigan State. Don't get mad that we're not getting an impact starter every single round. We're trying to be realistic. Realistically, a fourth round draft pick, that's depth. That's a depth guy. Look at Anthony Nelson. We just drafted him in the fourth round last year. He's a backup pass rusher. We're doing it again this year. We're going to get somebody to learn behind Shaq Barrett, somebody to learn behind JPP. why not? You know, build up some depth on that defense. All of our starters are pretty much set on defense. You know, just add depth. So
Yeah, and I think especially with him as well, because like I said, I think he could slide into a little bit of that three tech position and doesn't necessarily always need to be on the edge. So just really good depth all around.
all right, so Kenny Willex, he's going to be the 4th round pick. All right, we're here in round number 5. We're going back to the offensive side of the ball. It's a really offensive loaded draft right now, you know. But we're going to go interior offensive line. We're going to go Keith Ishmael, interior offensive lineman out of San Diego State. You know, me and Logan were just talking about it off screen here. His name's been popping up a little bit in certain draft talking circles, you know, as kind of like a small school guy who can really pop off. And I'll tell you one thing. There's one thing that Jason Light loves is taking some small school guys who he can mold into being pretty decent offensive linemen. So, Logan, what do you think about Keith Ishmael right now to San Diego State?
Yeah, absolutely. I think taking that approach definitely allows you to get some of those players that might be a little bit more of a value, just because, you know, if you're taking somebody out of bigger schools, the tape is there, people know their names. It's unlikely they're going to be too undervalued or under the radar, where some of these players, they might not be going up against the same competition week in, week out. And so it's a little bit more unsure of how they stack up compared to the others. So a little bit more risky of picks, but I mean, I think the Bucs have had a lot of success with some of their smaller school picks and far outperforming where they were drafted. So he was a guy that was really dominant against his competition, and really that's all you can ask for a guy as a interior offensive lineman, and it's got a great name to match. So
yeah, so I feel like at this point, you know, Keith Ishmael being the pick here in round 5, you know, we should probably explain why we're going so heavily offensive driven in the draft right now, you know, because we've taken an offensive tackle round 1, running back round 2, wide receiver round 3, you know, edge rusher round 4, but then back to the offense in round 5. You know, a lot of it, Bruce is really confident in the defense, I feel. You know, he's confident in the secondary. He's really confident in the front 7. And while you do need to add depth there, I feel like adding depth along the offensive side of the ball is a little bit more important right now, considering Tom Brady, he's only got 2 years. You know, you're really going to need to build up some offensive depth and make sure that you're prepared for most scenarios, you know. And I feel like, just simply put, you know, the offense needs more depth than the defense right now. You know, especially along the offensive line, in the wide receiver core, there's depth issues. You know, running back, there is still some depth issues there. You know, I feel like the offense has more depth issues than the defensive side of the ball. What do you think, Logan?
I think that bears out. I mean, one position I think, I don't know, maybe with one of the last picks we could talk about was linebacker. I mean, I don't know if maybe there's a little bit that could be done to bolster that, but I agree. I think front 7's really solid with that depth, and just adding another body in there, I think will really help. But really just trying to fortify that offense and kind of build those pieces around Brady to keep it as explosive as it was last year, but then obviously hopefully cutting down on the turnovers, which in effect is really going to help the defense. They just were on the field so much last year, and I really think I think Bruce Arians has definitely been more of a game manager. That's kind of his style. And so I think that's going to really help the defense this year. And I think you really see that step up in play, just given that they're not going to be so tired all the time.
Yeah, see, that's the big thing, you know? Like, I don't think Bruce is worried about the defense. That doesn't say he's worried about the offense either, given the current circumstances that the offense have with Tom Brady and, you know, Rob Gronkowski and everybody else. But, you know, in terms of just where you need to add players, you know, you need a starting offensive tackle. You need a potential fringe starter, you know, rotational type of starting running back kind of player. You need to add another wide receiver. You just lost Brashad Perriman. It's a big question mark after Evans and Godwin. You know, that you need to add to the offense. These are just all givens, you know. So anyway, Keith Ishmael, interior offensive lineman out of San Diego State. We're continuing to add to the offense. All right, guys, round number 6 here, and we're going interior defensive line. We're going to end this out with hopefully 2 defensive picks. Raekwon Williams out of Michigan State. Logan, what can you tell me about Raekwon Williams? Because coming out of high school, we just talked about this off camera, the guy was pretty high up there, you know.
Yeah, I think we might have mentioned him a little bit last round, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think potentially part of reason he might be falling later is I think the talent is there. There's potentially just some people questioned his time. He went to Michigan State and whether he was a good leader. Maybe some of the stuff like with class and all that. But as far as his production and talent, I don't think that's really questioned. And so I think he could potentially be a person in this later round who they could get more out of him than where they're picking him. So they might view him as that potential prospect who is going to bring them more value than where they're drafting him, as opposed to some of the other players around and who's available. I mean, at this point in the draft, it is pretty much just a guessing game and
Yeah.
doing your best to see who might outshine where they're being drafted. But I think he's one who could potentially break through and has really good size and athleticism. So
he is ranked the 202nd prospect here on the Draft Network's ranking board. Their big predictive board. But you talked about it. Talent's there, attitude issues. Bruce doesn't always love to do it, because he does have some standards. But if he thinks you really are worth investing some time into and you've had some off-field issues, he'll still pick you up and give you a chance. Tyrann Mathieu being the best example of that. And that worked out pretty freaking well, didn't it? So this isn't a very similar scenario because it is a sixth-round draft pick, but I still think that Raequan Williams could come in and contribute right away on that defensive line with William Golston, with Vita Vea, with Ndamukong Suh, Raheem Nunez-Roche, some other guys. They need depth at the defensive line. They just lost Bo Allen. They also just lost a couple of other guys as well. They need that depth. Raequan Williams, I think he would slide in and provide some great depth at that position. So we're going back defense, and then we'll go ahead and move on to our last pick. But right now, here in the sixth round, Raequan Williams out of Michigan State. All right, guys, last pick in this mock draft. We've gone a long time, by the way, Logan. I think we've gone an hour and a half. And when this is all cut down, it'll probably be around closer to an hour. But last pick here, I had to do it, and there is good reasoning for it, We're going to be taking Jordan Fuller, safety out of Ohio State. Okay? And people are going to scoff. They're going to say, what? Safety? Blah. Come on, James. Logan, why don't you tell us a little bit about Jordan Fuller before I explain my reasoning for wanting to make this pick?
yeah, I mean, I think for one, as far as seventh round goes, I think this might be a place where you look at people who had a lot of production in college, and Jordan Fuller was a 3-year starter. He's a scholar athlete. He's really great in run support. I think the reason why, people are mocking him 6', 7", potentially undrafted range is his measurables and speed aren't, in that elite echelon. But I do think he's really, really smart football player. He, at the very least, can contribute on special teams right away. So I think at the very least that is a reason to pick him up. And I think he does provide quality depth. He'll be a good fit in the locker room. So I think there's probably a few different places they could go with it, but I think if he's still available, he would be a solid pick at this last spot.
Yeah, I agree with that. And you guys have convinced me. After I made the Ryan Smith video and I said, is a special teams only player really worth being on a championship contending team? You guys all said yes. So you know what? I'm giving you a taste of your own medicine. If Jordan Fuller comes in and only contributes on special teams, I ain't even mad, bro. So, I'm going to bring him in. He's going to join that safety room. He could even, with how Todd Bowles does his defense, he has the weird, sub linebackers, the nickel and dime linebackers, and the weird stuff that he does. Deon Buchanan had a similar role like that, where you're playing a little bit of linebacker, a little bit of edge rusher, a little bit of safety, a little bit of nickel corner, just everything, I want to try and see if we can make Jordan Fuller do that. He's got the size. 6'2", 205 pounds? Come on. That's good size, in my opinion, okay? So you can play him at a lot of different spots. I feel like you could play him at linebacker if you needed to a little bit. Play him at safety. Logan just said the kid's smart. He can handle it, okay? And I feel like it's just a flyer anyway. If worse comes to worse, put him on your practice squad. Let him develop a little bit, okay? Justin Evans is still a question mark. There's still some question marks in terms of the depth of that safety position. Dakota Dixon is there. Mike Edwards is there. Jordan, Whitehead is there right now as well. I still feel like they could, afford to add another safety just to get a body in there. Why not? Add some competition. It's a crapshoot anyway. It's the 7th round. Who cares? Jordan Fuller, safety out of Ohio State. I'm going to make him the pick. I feel like he could contribute on special teams right away. He's got great size, and I feel like you could move him around a lot, especially in Todd Bowles' defense. And that will be it for this draft.
Nice. I just wanted to add a quick, just not wanting to slander anybody. I just did a quick search to make sure what I was saying about Raekwon Williams was accurate. And I think doing a little bit more research, it is a little bit more complicated than that. He had a pretty tough upbringing and childhood and all that, but it seems like his time Michigan State, he was a pretty good leader. He was a team captain at his senior year, so maybe we'll do a little bit of backtracking what I said.
Okay.
But maybe there was some stuff early on, but he's shown through, so I think we'll get the Bruce Arians seal of approval if he is there and he's still available. He's a mean nose tackle, so that could be a good fit for them.
Okay.
So just wanted to add that.
Well, there you go. Well, there you have it. And Jordan Fuller here is the pick, and that wraps it up. So here we are. We're at the final, screen here that we see. Now, on this screen, you see Mekhi Becton. It's not Mekhi Becton. It's Andrew Thomas is our first round pick. Remember, I had to go back, restart the mock draft so I can get the rest of the picks. Mekhi Becton is not going to be the pick for this mock draft. It's Andrew Thomas, okay? So, Logan, what do you think? We took 3 offensive players in the first 3 rounds, then defense, then offense, then defense, then defense. I really like this mock draft, and I feel, in terms of being as realistic as we possibly can, I feel like this is pretty realistic. What do you think?
Yeah, as far as realistic goes, I do think all of these players are very reasonable that they could be there. Donovan Peoples-Jones in the 3rd round, I'm not as sure, but there is several other wide receivers that could go there. Same with Clyde Edwards-Helaire in the 2nd round. So even if, that specific player isn't there, I do think kind of with the rationale, with what was behind the picks, it is very realistic. And I think we were approaching this mock draft from the Bucs being in that win now mode, and here are the pieces that they can add to contribute to this team right away. And so I think we were making picks with that in mind. So I think it's solid. If I was a Bucs fan, I think I'd be pretty happy if they're able to get a draft like this. And maybe Mekhi Becton, maybe he would be the person at pick 14. So it's pretty funny how that worked out for this mock draft that he was there. So
yeah, that is a little.
I do think it is pretty realistic.
Yeah, that is a little ironic. I guess either one. It's whichever one, but. Yeah, I think what we did was really good. We added a lot of depth, taking them in realistic spots as well. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, that one's a little bit tricky. Donovan Peoples-Jones, that one's really tricky. But, you never know how the draft works. I feel like our later picks were definitely kind of very picked in the right slots as well, and they're ready to contribute right away. So, yeah, that's it for the final mock draft, guys. Thank you all so much for joining us for mock draft season. Logan, thank you for being a part of the final mock draft we did here for this year. It's greatly appreciated.
Absolutely. Looking forward to the live stream tomorrow.
Yep, and for everybody who, made it to the end of this video, maybe you skipped to the end just to see who we all picked, and then you can comment, this sucks. Whatever it is. Tomorrow at 7:30 p.m., we will be starting a live stream. The entire first round. Live stream reactions to the NFL draft. It's going to be loads of fun. Logan's going to be there. I'm going to have some other guests on as well. I have a lot of cool graphics to show. It should be loads and loads of fun. And hope to see all of you guys there. But guys, until the next video or the next live stream, I'll see you guys in the next one. But until then, as always, guys, goodbye for now and go Bucs.